Hello and welcome to the EduCon Podcast, where we speak to higher education institutions to understand what's happening in the ever-changing world of education. This is Janhvi Pawar, and this conversation is brought to you by Java and Skoda. Today we have some very interesting speakers from our AICon Gala, where we have people not just from academia, but also from industry. I hope you have a great time listening to this podcast. Today's guest is Professor Paresh Date, who is the joint head of the mathematics department at Brunel University London. He's an expert in latent state estimation and is going to talk more about his research on today's podcast. He has published over 50 papers, guided 12 PhD students, and acts as a consultant for industry professionals, both in India and the United Kingdom. Professor Date, thank you so much for joining with us today. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure to be with you.
So, when I was looking at your background and the work that you've done, I noticed that you transitioned from electrical engineering to mathematics and financial modeling. What has that transition been like for you?
It was a smooth and natural transition. I did my degrees in electronics and telecommunication and then control and instrumentation. And it just so happened that when I joined the Brunel University of London, I landed in a group which worked mostly in financial mathematics. And I found that a lot of underlying mathematical tools which I was familiar and very comfortable with, like stochastic processes, probability, differential equations, the same tools are used in finance. And in finance, getting real data to work with, to try something out was very easy. You just get it from a Bloomberg terminal. You don't need a lab and a technician and so on. I like working with real data, so it was a very easy transition for me.
Very interesting. Do you feel like your electrical engineering background also has helped you a lot in that sense, maybe thinking differently when it comes to approaching problems?
Yeah, it has indeed. I always look at any piece of mathematics. I'm still engineer through and through, even though I work in maths. I look at essentially look at a problem and then try to look for tools to solve them. And that's a very engineering mindset. It's just making the right sort of assumption, looking for the right tools so that I can essentially fix things. My view of looking at things is fixing them. And that has been very useful, actually, in financial mathematics.
Very interesting. When I look at your research, you had a very long-standing interest in something called latent state estimation. So for the ones who are a little unversed with this word, what exactly does that mean?
Latent state estimation is a kind of hidden technology which underpins essentially a lot of modern life. There are things that we are actually interested in, but which we cannot see or which our instruments cannot see. And they have to be continuously estimated or inferred from something else which we can see. And this happens essentially everywhere. So the easiest example is global positioning satellites or GPS systems. If you have a Google map or an Apple map and you're heading towards a particular place, then you are a blue dot moving on the map and that place is highlighted somewhere else. What is really happening is that satellite is measuring its own range and bearing of you as the blue dot and of that location, and then continuously updating the distance between you and that place. What it is not measuring is the actual distance between you and your destination. It's measuring something else and inferring what the other quantity of interest is, which it cannot say. The positioning satellite is not sitting next to you and measuring distance. The underlying technology behind this is no different from, say, estimating volatilities from observed option prices or estimating tomorrow's rainfall based on previous rainfalls and so on. So that technology is filtering. That underlying mathematical technology and its applications is what I work on.
So it's something that can be used essentially across various industries and various sectors.
Indeed,
Yeah.
indeed. Yeah.
Yes. Interesting. What got you into it?
Just my electrical engineering background. It is something that was very interesting. And when I started working in financial maths, I said, I like fixing things. I like solving problems. I came across a problem where I thought, oh, I can use Kalman filter to do this. Nobody seems to have used it. I wonder why. So I tried it out. There is data on Bloomberg, so one doesn't have to look for data. And it seems to work. And that's how I got started, really.
Wonderful. When it comes to, for instance, looking at some of the tangible impact of your research, how do you think that's really helped in terms of industry applications as well?
So there are small companies to very large organizations which have collaborated with me, which use filtering in different facets of their work, essentially. So I had collaborated with an SME called Optiris Systems in London, and they used our algorithm for filtering in predicting commodity futures prices to develop a software product. I had worked with UK's debt management office, so people who issue government bonds, who decide government gives them a target to raise a certain amount of money from public, and they decide what securities to issue at what interest rates and what maturity. So we work with them in terms of designing optimal debt issuance strategies. With my collaborators elsewhere in India, in fact, they have worked on underwater tracking with DRDO in India. So there are a lot of practical applications.
Very interesting. Can we hear more about your project with the DRDO?
I don't think I'm allowed to talk too much about it.
No worries at all. So because your research spans both theory and applications, do you see that there's any at times barriers from the industry side in trying to, adopt or use your research in their practices as well?
There is a lot of conservatism in the industry because no manager wants to basically expend money and resources on things which may not work. So they already want a completely proven technology which is guaranteed to work. So they buy technology as a product. In that sense, they are not necessarily interested in research. That is a very sweeping statement. Obviously, there are many honorable exceptions. But in general, the real barrier is cost. Where do you put your research cost in your books? I've been lucky to meet many people in the industry who championed research, who did the necessary lobbying, essentially, to raise money to do research. But it comes down eventually, like everything else, it comes down to finding the right individuals.
Right. So then with the kind of technologies that you also work on, how do you think industries and companies should approach this? Should there be, for instance, pilot projects? Should there be, for instance, like a sandpit where companies try to experiment or keep aside a budget for these kind of experiments with the latest technologies that you guys bring on?
The thing is, companies are looking for solutions to problems. And if you're doing something in a certain way for years or possibly decades, and for you it works, then somebody coming to you saying that if you do it in this different way, then you will save a lot of money. It takes an awful lot of convincing. For people to have a sandpit or anything else, they need to think that they have a problem. And if you're spending a lot of money on something, but so is all your competitors, you don't think there is a problem. So the problem is people don't see the problem.
And I understand. Has research changed this space a lot in terms of, because, for instance, I'm sure you've been doing this for so many decades. You've seen the transition as well with the various forms of technology. Has research, therefore, redefined itself multiple times, whether it's perhaps with pilot projects or execution or even the collection of different information?
Research and so I would separate that into two. Research and just spirit of inquiry hasn't really changed much in terms of having access to information has become very easy. Doing some of the intermediate steps which need to be done have become very easy. Uh, Industry facing research, so research which is defined by user defined problems, um, has also changed. It has in some ways become more difficult because industry itself is evolving a lot. Most of the industry, at least I work with, is evolving a lot and is looking a lot inward, in a sense. And I find their interaction with academia has reduced rather than increased. I mean, picture might be slightly different. I think it is slightly different in India, but that's what I find in Europe.
I understand. And you've also helped PhD students, right? What has that experience been like for you as a teacher, as an educator yourself?
It's extremely rewarding. So I have graduated 12 PhD students as their first supervisor, and it's I guess like being an academic parent. So one of my former PhD students is a managing director at a major hedge fund consultancy. Some other is vice president at Barclays, and it's just very nice to see our students doing so well in whatever field they work in.
What do you think is the most important quality a student should have in that sense? Somebody who wants to pursue their PhD with you, what do you think is a very important skill set to have?
I would say, skill set, they need to have good academic background for whatever field they want to work in. But two key things is an inquiring mind and patience, which many students underestimate at the beginning of their PhD. Everybody starts their PhD thinking that they want to make the world a better place. And at the end of 3 years, they just want to finish their PhD. So it's patience is a virtue I very strongly advocate for.
Lovely. And in terms of, for instance, if we talk about international collaborations, right, perhaps between India and the United Kingdom, could be for research or anything else. How do you personally view that?
There is a lot of scope for doing that more. There are already a lot of collaborations. I myself visit IIT Patna roughly every 2 years. I have been at IIT Gandhinagar as a visiting professor for 6 months a few years ago. And the only textbook I have written is with a friend indeed in IIT Patna. So there is a lot of scope for more collaboration. I know there is some coming up now. There is a new transnational education program. University of Bristol is opening a campus in Navi Mumbai. So those are very welcome developments, but I don't think the potential of collaboration is really fully explored. There's a lot more we can do.
I understand. And when we, for instance, think about exploring potential collaborations as well, why is that so important, do you think, for research to have this cross-cultural exchange of ideas and information?
People come from, once it might not feel like it in STEM subjects, but one's socioeconomic background also affects how one thinks, how one approaches problems. And I find many of my Indian collaborators come up with solutions that I wouldn't have thought about. It is far less. So we live in slightly resource-rich environment. I don't have problems with having access to Bloomberg, for example. My Indian collaborators are much better at jugaad, which you do if you need to do it. And that is a very valuable skill. So there is a lot to learn always from both sides, and both sides benefit. It's a win-win.
Something you mentioned earlier was the fact that you've also authored a textbook. You've also, of course, published a lot of research papers. What is the experience of publishing a textbook like? Is it different than publishing a research paper?
Yes, textbook is exceedingly painful in terms of collecting together stuff which is accessible enough. And there are a lot of things when writing a research paper, you don't have to rewrite, you just give a reference. If you're really interested, this thing is true. If you're really interested, why? look up this other paper. You can't do that in the textbook. You have to write down absolutely everything. And you make up mistakes, you go forward and backwards, and you finish it, and then you think, never again. So research paper is a lot more fun, really. I enjoy writing research papers. I enjoy reviewing research papers. I usually enjoy reading reviews of my own research papers. Textbook is it's something that is a kind of academic depth. I mean, one learns because somebody else has written textbooks. So at some point, you think you should do your bit as well. But I wouldn't go so far as saying it's fun.
Apart from latent state estimation, which is, of course, the research that you worked on, anything else that you'd like to share with us in terms of the research interests that you have?
Big research interest is financial mathematics and derivative pricing. So until recently, I was running an MSc Financial Maths course at my university, at Brunel University of London. I still teach on it. I find the amount of financial mathematics taught in India is not really at par with the size of Indian market, as a size of Indian capital markets. And there is really a lot of scope for any university or any educational institution to develop a master's program or something similar in financial mathematics. So that is my, anyway, big area of both research and teaching.
If I can dive into that a little bit deeper, why do you think it's so important?
The reason is basically liquidity and the ability of corporate houses to manage and mitigate their risk. So if I can give an example, I'll try and keep it short. If you are an airline and you go to a fuel company and say you want this much quantity of fuel, let's say from June 26 to December 26, every month I want this much quantity of fuel, and I'm willing to pay whatever is the spot price of fuel on the day I buy it, or average price between now and that date, whichever is lower. This particular contract is bought and sold in the West. It's called arithmetic averagation option. It is not bought or sold in India because there is no knowledge as to how do you price it. This is not traded in the market. Its price is not determined by supply and demand. What you need to do is you need to build models from observed securities, prices of futures, and then use those models and correct numerical techniques, use Monte Carlo or solving partial differential equations to come up with a price. Those techniques are not taught in India. That training is not available. Therefore, those financial products are not there. And educational institutions, to some extent, rightly think that those products don't exist. There seems to be no demand, so we don't need to offer a program. So that's a catch-22 situation I see India in.
Right. And if I can ask a little bit more about that as well, for instance, then for any academic person who's watching this from India, what can they do to ensure that, topics like this, like financial math that you were talking about, is also showcased to Indian students back home? What can a university or an institution do?
Start engaging, well, two ways. One is start engaging with the exchange and with the finance industry. There are corporate houses from the West, so Franklin Templeton, for example, who do have their own quantitative finance teams based in India, but start talking to local corporate houses, to Bajaj Securities and similar industrial houses like Reliance, and try and understand user needs, show them what can be done, start offering courses, and then build up programs. It's not something that can happen overnight, but I do think it needs to happen.
Right. And for any students who are watching this, or any young researchers who also want to enter the intersection of, like, for instance, your background of finance, as well as engineering, as well as mathematics, what are some of the emerging topics that they can focus on and how should they look at the future of this world?
Do you mean of financial math?
Of financial math.
Okay. About future of the world, I'm slightly pessimistic. Let's not talk about this. About financial mathematics, I'm quite optimistic that it's a matter of when rather than whether. So it will happen. Students need to be good at programming, good at fundamental mathematics, essentially, partial differential equations, stochastic processes, and that kind of stuff. The economics behind financial math is very easy to learn. It is being having a sound grounding in maths and in programming is what students really need.
Mm-hmm. Any emerging topics that they should also maybe keep an eye on or start reading more about? Any resources that you would really recommend to students as well?
I can suggest machine learning, but I think most of them who are ambitious do it already.
Great, Sam. Great. Any last words of advice to anybody who's watching this video, sir?
Don't be afraid to experiment. That's, those who are watching, it depends on what stage they are. But to students, I would say don't follow the herd and don't be afraid to experiment.
Lovely. On that thought, Professor Date, thank you so much for your time. It's been lovely chatting with you. It's been an honor and pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.